It was 2014. I was just 6 months officially into my business and I was drowning. When I started my business, I charged clients a set monthly fee for business consulting work with a promised set of deliverables per month. I remember getting that first $1,500 check in the mail from a well-known event planner based in New York, and I felt rich. Turns out I way underestimated the time it would actually take me to accomplish those promised deliverables. In the end, it took me 2 times as long as anticipated to complete the work, cutting my monthly income in half. That $1,500, when broken down per hour, ended up being about negative $8 an hour. Side note, this is one of the biggest reasons I encourage my clients to charge hourly until you're really good at estimating your project flat fee, and definitely track your time. Needless to say, I was drowning, buried under a pile of client work and emails asking about project updates, you know the ones. I looked at my calendar, figured I could finish up all of my current client workload in just 2 months, and decided to take that next month off once I was complete as a sabbatical. I told all my clients I was taking a quote-unquote sabbatical, but instead of being a relaxing, rejuvenating time to think up new ideas, I used that time just to catch up, revise my pricing structure, and rethink my entire process without the distraction of constant client emails and new inquiries. This wasn't easy since this meant an entire month off without being paid, but it was the best thing I ever did for my business. During that time, I stumbled across a TED Talk entitled The Power of Time Off. I will definitely link that video below. The speaker shared his idea that instead of saving up all of our time off until we retire, why not incorporate that time off throughout our working years? So he took off 1 year every 7th year of his business. At the time, I never considered taking a year off, which I ended up doing in 2020, ironically, my 7th year in business. But I did start implementing a 2-month sabbatical each year. So 1 month in the summer, 1 month in December, because I really like Christmas and I wanted to spend the entire month watching Hallmark movies, baking cookies, wrapping presents. Now, I totally know taking a month-long paid sabbatical or a 3-month paid maternity leave can sound impossible, but I've now taught hundreds of my students and clients to do the same thing with one simple practice: learning to track your high and low seasons. Now, I know that probably piques your interest, so I'll make sure to dig into that in more detail in another video. But today, I'm sharing the process I've developed over the past 7 years for planning, prepping, and saving for time off. We've used this same process to take month-long sabbaticals since 2014, a 3-month road trip in 2016, 1 year off completely in 2020, and now a 3-month paid maternity leave in 2021. So without further ado, how to plan, prep, and save for maternity leave or extended time off. So step number 1, you got to plan for it. Get those dates on the calendar. I started the practice of annual planning in 2007, my very first full year working in finance. Each year as an office, we would take a weekend away at a cabin and share our goals for the upcoming year. Annual planning is now a time kind of out of your business to work on your business, and it's one of my favorite weeks of the year. Since starting my own company, I've implemented this same practice and now take a week off each December to plan for the upcoming year. I've now taught all of my students and my clients to do the same thing because I love it so much, and implemented it into a course and a planner called My Blueprint Year. One of the very first steps of annual planning is just to sit down with your calendar, mark all the holidays, birthdays, and time off. As mentioned previously, I typically plan my sabbaticals for my low season, the entire month of December, and also 1 month in the summer. This is fluctuated from year to year. Because a lot of my clients have their kids home during the summer, this is a busier time for them, so slower for me. So for maternity leave this year, well, that one was kind of planned for me. I was due March 11th. I decided to start my maternity leave 2 weeks early, just in case. So see below my recommended what I call my wind down period. I wanted to take a full 12 weeks off with the little one, so I actually planned to return in June, giving me March, April, and May completely off. So the second part of this process is to build in a time buffer, which I call a wind down and a rev up period. Once you have those dates on the calendar, I recommend building in buffer periods. So for maternity leave, I built in a 2-week buffer prior to my due date. I wanted to have all of my work done by Friday, February 26th. I'm so glad I did, because inevitably I was still wrapping up things until my due date. I read an article once that mentioned it takes 3 days into vacation to stop thinking about work, and a day or 2 before vacation ends, you start thinking about it again. That's why I build in these wind down and rev up periods before and after taking time off, so that I can actually enjoy the time I take off. So same for coming back. I plan to return in June for maternity leave, but didn't take on any client work or plan any launches until July. This gave me a chance to get back in the swing of things, check email, just get back in the groove and rev back up before having to sell something again. And I needed to figure out being a working mom and what my workload could look like then. So for my month-long sabbatical, I build in 1 week buffers before and after. The length of the buffer really depends on the length of the time away. Even for speaking events, I build in 1 day before and 1 day after that I have no calls, no client work, no student obligations, just so I can make sure that I'm either packing or getting back in the groove. So step number 2, you got to plan for it. I do this in 4 different ways. The first is just to set your intentions for your time away. Not all time off is just for rest. Maternity leave clearly was taking care of a baby, but it's important to set expectations. Will you work during your time off? Are you going to work on your business? Is that the goal of the time off? Or is it just for relaxing and having fun? And if it's for relaxing, what does relaxing look like? Is that reading a book or sitting by the pool? For our 3-month road trip back in 2016, and also during maternity leave, I actually worked 1 day a week. Since we had new students going through my signature program, the Blueprint Model, during both of those times, I was coaching them for live office hours once a week. For my summer sabbaticals, I typically take that time completely off. I plan trips to visit friends, a summer reading list, and completely check out. Whereas my December sabbatical, I work on my business. As mentioned, I host annual planning week for my students, and I use that time myself to plan for the upcoming year. We review our finances, set goals, tidy things up, do some new processes and systems, and just spend that time closing out the year and prepping for the upcoming year. Step 2 is to get the help you need. So the first hire I made in my business, other than contract work for like brand shoots and copywriting, was an assistant. In 2016, during our 3-month road trip, I didn't have an assistant and was handling emails and student work like 1 time a week. But in 2017, I hired an assistant who handled everything while I was away. It was the most disconnected, restful sabbatical I've ever had, and I've stuck to that ever since. So for maternity leave, I was coaching students through my signature course, the Blueprint Model, which I mentioned before, and that was every Thursday. So I went ahead and scheduled backup speakers, I had them on call, in case I was in labor, basically. So that actually, I needed them twice. On my due date, I ended up having a doctor's appointment, and then Madeline came the next week. So 2 Thursdays I was out, and it was great to have a backup plan. I also had community members lined up to host our monthly, we have co-working money dates every month in my group. And so it was really fun to have students from the group while I was out on maternity leave hosting those to keep those going while I was gone. Third is you want to define your boundaries. Once you set the intention of your time off and get the help you need, it's important to define your boundaries and communicate those to your staff and your clients. So for my Christmas and summer sabbaticals, I want to be fully away from the business. So my team only reaches out to me if there's some type of an emergency, which there usually isn't. They know how to handle declined payments and things that come up. They're empowered to do that. So they really typically handle it themselves. During my year off in 2020, I decided to work only if I was excited to. We had enough saved so I didn't have to bring in any income that year, but once the pandemic hit, I wanted to show up and serve. I put together some free PDFs as well as a couple small paid webinars to help with money management during an economic downturn. It felt good to show up without the pressure of having to sell, so that was a boundary I created for my year off. For maternity leave, I worked 1 day a week to coach students and planned to work part-time in May if I chose to, which I ended up not doing. Other boundaries I've decided to do in the past that might be helpful for you is, will you stay on social media? I find that not being on social media is the best to truly unplug. That's totally up to you. Will you answer emails? Emails from clients, emails from students, or emails from staff? Also, how should your team get a hold of you? I don't check email when I'm gone, so if it's an emergency, they know to call or text me. Last step here is you want to automate everything. The day before my leave begins, I automate everything that I possibly can. I automate posts in my student Facebook group, any posts in my public Facebook group. I no longer have Instagram, but when I did, I used Planoly, which I think is now called Plan, to do that. And my team handles Pinterest, but we use Tailwind to automate that. I always have great intentions to have new blog content ready, but I have failed to do that. And I also had great intentions to automate our personal finance course called Blueprint at Home, like on an evergreen, which means that it sells without me having to work. So I didn't get to that either. The very last thing I do before I leave, though, is turn on my away message. I save that to last because there's this mental routine that helps me just sign off before I sign off. I kind of think of it like a bedtime routine, something that we're working on right now with Madeline. Our bodies respond to a process. And for me, putting that away message up last and turning off my computer signals that work is done and I can step away. I do this before any extended time off, whether it's a year off in 2020 or simply like a 3-day speaking event. I make that the last step. Just a little pro tip here. If you plan to be gone without someone checking your email, that's totally fine. For more than a week, I add this type of language to my away message. I'll say something to the extent of, I'll be gone until this date. This inbox will not be checked, but if it's urgent, you can reach out to my team at this email address. All messages in this inbox will be deleted upon my return, so please reach back out after this date to have your message read. I like that approach because it keeps me from coming back to 100 emails, which some of them aren't even relevant anymore because you've been gone for so long. And if it's important, they will email again. Last but not least, we have to pay for this. So all of my students and clients know what I'm about to say is basically how I approach all things business. Before taking any time off, you must know your financial need down to the penny. What is enough? In the Blueprint model, we have an entire building block dedicated to what I call defining enough. We do this each year to calculate our sales goal, and I also do this when planning time away. So what is enough personally? What is enough for the business? And what is enough for what I call your re-entry period? So here's the calculation. Personal need plus business overhead plus the re-entry strategy, which I'll explain in a second. For our 3-month road trip in 2016, I didn't want to take on any one-on-one clients during that time. So we would not have rent because we were moving, Kyle just graduated, but we'd still have travel costs, our personal expenses like insurance, loan payments, things that didn't go away, as well as the expense to keep the business up and running. So we set a goal of $70,000 to have saved prior to that trip. That was the first year we launched the Blueprint model, which at the time cost $1,997 per student. So our goal was 35 students. We ended up selling 54, which was awesome. So same when we took off in 2020, I took an entire year off. We calculated our personal financial need, taxes, savings goals, plus overhead in the business. So even though the business was shut down for the year, I was still paying for like software fees since my students were still using their programs. We calculated that number and launched all of my online content in 1 week. We called it the Legacy Campaign, which generated enough income for me to take off the entire year, which was awesome. Then for maternity leave, it looked very similar. We calculated 3 months of our personal financial need plus 1 quarterly bonus plus overhead. And then I added this re-entry period. So it was 1 month of personal and business expenses. That way I had an additional month that I could get back into the groove of things without having to sell something. So that was really helpful just to have enough saved for that re-entry period. Years ago, I told one of my clients to make the plan and then work the plan, and it just kind of stuck. It's now something I teach all of my students. The plan gives me comfort. Even if you aren't a planner by nature, going into any amount of time away with a solid plan of how you're going to pay for that time will allow you to actually enjoy it. Worrying about money while you're off just isn't going to be restful. So last but not least, give yourself grace. Even with the best planning, prepping, and saving, my time off always looks a little different than I anticipated. I've had to work when I was supposed to be off, and as mentioned earlier, I've never gotten all the content pre-planned that I had hoped. But the one thing that has always happened before I take time off is I know down to the penny how much we need to make it happen. My friend Hillary sent me this awesome quote by Philosophy of Leisure this week, and it said, 40-hour work weeks are a relic of the industrial age. Knowledge workers function like athletes. They train and sprint, and then they rest and reassess. I have found this so true in my own business. While I wish I could work at like 80% all the time, long distance, marathon pace, I've come to terms with the fact that I work in sprints. I give 150% for short bursts, and then I need time to recharge. Time off has become not only a beloved time in my business, but a necessary time. Whether you're planning for an upcoming maternity leave or just wishing you could take a week off without feeling the pressure to answer email, I hope this 3-step process helps you plan, prep, and save for your upcoming time away.